This week, Jimmy Sanders, head of security at DVD.com, talks about cracks in the castle. Next up, we have a technical segment. I'm going to walk you through securing Ubiquiti Wi-Fi systems. In the final segment, it's the security news. More QR codes you shouldn't trust, race conditions in Rust, encrypting railways, PwnKit, the latest Linux exploit, tricking researchers into crashing, cybersecurity is broken, the best cybersecurity research paper, evil favicons, escaping Kubernetes, pimping your cubicle, and someone who actually recovered their crypto wallet. Tyler. All that and more on this episode of Paul's Security Weekly.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where exploits run wild, packets aren't the only things getting sniffed, and the cocktails flow steady. It's Paul's Security Weekly.
Are you tired of your penetration testing teams having that unhygienic smell? Have you been described as smelling like a monkey house on a hot summer day? Well, our whole new line of Security Weekly hygiene products will solve that problem for you right now. Try Josh Marpet flavored mint, or Joff Thayer flavored, jasmine. And of course, there's Paul Acidorian scented candles that smell like musk. So please welcome Paul Acidorian.
Welcome to a very musty Paul Security Weekly. It's episode number 725, recorded on January 26, 2021, right here in G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island. To my left, the doctor is in the house. Dr. Doug White is here with us. Welcome.
I is here.
Yes.
I made it.
Is that a Hackers reference?
Maybe. Yeah, it is actually.
Awesome. On the lines remotely, Mr. Lee Neely.
Good evening. Good to be here. And remember, fish keep their money in a riverbank.
He's just full of them tonight. Mr. Josh Marpet is here with us. Josh, welcome.
I am here, and just the dad jokes are killing me.
Yes.
I mean, I ordered a chicken
job.
and an egg from Amazon. I'll let you know.
Oh, God. Mr. Tyler Robinson is here with us. Tyler, welcome.
I don't know if they can get much worse, but a book from Amazon sounds pretty bad.
Tyler, I'm looking forward to the Ubiquiti segment. I'm going to draw on some of your expertise as well. You're my kind of monitor, right? Making sure I get it right, making sure I don't screw anything up.
It's funny you had to do so many things that I've had to do very, very recently as well. So it made me feel a little better that you're having some of the same issues.
Tyler burst my bubble. I'm like, dude, have you seen this script? He's like, I've had to use this before. I'm like, have you gone in the database and reset? Yeah, done that before. I'm like, oh, you've had a really rough time with Ubiquiti. We're going to tell you all about it in the segment coming up next. So it's going to be a lot of fun. CRA's Business Intelligence Unit has launched its next survey on Zero Trust. What are your barriers to Zero Trust implementation? Take our survey and enter to win a $500 Tango card by visiting securityweekly.com/Zero Trust. Report results will be released in our upcoming Zero Trust e-summit coming up in March. Jimmy Sanders is the head of security at DVD.com with nearly 40 years of experience in cybersecurity globally. Jimmy has also served as the San Francisco Bay Area chapter president of the Information Systems Security Association, or as we refer to it, ISSA, since 2014, has been a keynote speaker at Black Hat, RSA, Secure World, InfoSec World, as well as many other notable events. Jimmy, it's an honor and a privilege to have you on the show this evening. Welcome.
Hey, Paul, it's great to be here. Having a lot of fun so far.
Absolutely, yeah. We warmed ourselves up pretty good. There's been a lot of shenanigans already.
The hot mic special.
That's right. Jimmy, how'd you get your start in information security?
So, crazy story. I was a device manager for a company, and the CIO was walking around. And as many people know in security, there's always security shortage. And so the person who at the time was security engineer, had been a vacant position for over a year. And so I was looking at the qualifications. I was like, I can do that. I can do that. I can do that. So I looked at the CIO and I said, I think I can do this position. And he said, you think? And I said, yeah. And he said, okay, you got 3 months And if you don't do a good job, whatever. But so we'll give you a 3-month run. And that was in 2006. And I've been here ever since.
And I mean, that's a motivation, though. You got 3 months to prove yourself. Like, come do it, right?
Oh, man, that's the thing I tell people when I mentor, when I talk to students, is a closed mouth doesn't get fed. If I would have never asked, and so a closed mouth doesn't get fed, but also if you don't deliver, you don't get fed as well. So I had to not only ask for the position, but show why I should stay in that position.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
It's good to see somebody that actually got into security because they should be in security. So I kept running into people who I would, like at companies, and they would go, yeah, I became the security officer because I had a computer on my desk, but I didn't know how to use it. But they just set it there to store it. And then somebody walked through and went, you are now the high-tech crime specialist.
So what you're saying is so on point, but that's why one of the things that I've noticed in the industry is that was really true in the early parts of being like head of security, CISO, whatever. But now we're on the 3rd and 4th generation CISOs where they're going to business school, they're going to major in security, and that was their focus, was to be a CISO. So it's great to see that evolution of the role and the title.
Yeah, you occasionally interview people now, and you go, "Wow, I'm not embarrassed for you." So it's like they love it when I
embarrassed for
do you think some of the
What an
management
amazing endorsement! What a ringing endorsement! I'm not embarrassed for you today.
You've come a long way. I mean, it used to be one of those things where you're like going, "Can you spell TCP/IP?" And they're going, I don't think that was covered in my program.
Do you think that some of the discrepancies we're seeing between good companies starting to do this well and getting the management piece right, where they've got the proper top-down support, the leadership around security initiatives, the security roadmaps, and the maturity that we're starting to see in a lot of these bigger corporations versus some of the, we'll say, the old guard and/or old ideas that keep hanging on in security that doesn't tend to change?
So one of the things that I've seen is if you have a CEO who thinks that they're technical, who still has the fingers in all the pies, they do a lot of things on a whim. So, I like that CISO. I don't like that CISO. It doesn't matter if the CISO is effective or not. It's how do I feel at this point in time? Where you get into more mature companies or more companies that have more rigorous structure where they're asking their CISOs, are you doing a good job? Show me how you're doing a good job. Don't show me how you're doing a lot of, FUD or a lot of other things. And so that's one of the big things that I've seen. And it's hard because you want to take these companies at this high flying, glamorous companies, but you're working with a CEO who's a whack job, who makes decisions on the fly sometimes. And sometimes I feel sorry for those guys. And I'm like, girls. And I'm like, oh man, you're in for it now.
Mm-hmm. I know some of those quite well.
Do you think the CISOs and the CEOs don't necessarily have to work together? If you remove that emotion and you go off of metrics and you make it quantitative rather than qualitative on how you feel, you think that still functions well within a security department at that level?
Of course, it functions well. But the thing is if it's a company CEO's baby, they don't necessarily go by quantitative metrics. They go by, the CISO is killing the company's culture. The CISO is changing things. And so those might be things that we, from a technological standpoint, wanted to be about numbers. Where when you want to talk about zero trust isn't about numbers. It's about what does zero trust, when you implement it, do to the culture of a company.
How do you get them through that?
Zero trust is for the systems, not for the people.
Yeah.
Yes, but so it's for the systems, not for the people. But if you're telling a developer who's been at this company for 5 years and they've been running code on the servers that are local to them, that now that server that sits right next to your desk, you're going to have to do a whole new procedure just to log into that server right next to your desk because of zero trust. That's a culture thing.
I'm going to disagree with you. I'm going to disagree hard with you, actually. I think that it's a process thing I'm not going to think that it's a culture thing. And if it's a culture thing, it's a culture thing of evolving. It's a culture thing of, CI/CD pipelines. I'll try to use sort of a parallel example. CI/CD pipelines have come to include security, have come to include error checking, have come to include a lot of pieces that are out there. And while it's a process change, but it doesn't mean it's a cultural change. I haven't gotten rid of my vulnerability management people. I've just pointed their stuff in a different place now. Okay. It doesn't mean that I don't love them. I don't care about them. It's like, oh, vuln, it's like, but it's more along the lines of vulnerability management is in the process. It's in the workflow over here, not where it used to be. Does that make sense?
And,
am I thinking wrongly about what you're saying?
What you're saying makes total sense. But from what I've seen, when you're at companies that use the word culture fit a lot, which is a lot of Silicon Valley companies do, you start changing the process, and that's essentially changing the culture.
Yeah, I'm going to disagree with Josh disagreeing with Jimmy because I agree. I agree with the culture thing and the finger pointing because I've been there many times, and maybe this is changing. So you may be right, Josh, but when I was doing this and we were going to the CEO and we're saying you need to do these 5 things, we were getting tons of pushback, not because it made sense, but because they did not want to change the open environment, the friendly, we all share the same password. We don't have that kind of crap here. We don't do background checks on our employees, no matter how far they have to stay away from schools. It doesn't matter. We're good. And they didn't want to hear that there were these issues until they saw issues. Then it became a process issue. Now, when it was just talk, it didn't matter, and it was culture. But the minute they got attacked or they got taken out or their servers got wiped, then all of a sudden it was a process issue, and they wanted a sound process to fix it. So in a way, I guess I kind of agree with Josh from that perspective, but I also disagree with the disagreement.
You're disagreeing with me about the compelling event. You're saying that until there's a compelling event to force them to change, they believe it's a culture issue. Once there's a compelling event that is forcing them to change, then it's a process issue. And that's I can get with that.
So are you
but I think that it's also the way that you phrase
the disagreement of the?
I'm agreeing with some of the disagreeers, but disagreeing with others of the disagreeers while agreeing with the agreement from the first place.
We need a flow chart and we need a process on this.
I think it's interesting to think about the relationship between process and culture. I think that's a really interesting aspect if we tie that to security.
Well, I mean,
no, because when I first got my role in security, I worked for a finance company where you used to doing things in a rigid, you have to account for every dollar you spend, every time you do anything had to be accounted for. And then you get in Silicon Valley where money is pretty much growing on trees. Mm-hmm. So you're like, oh, you want this widget? Go get that widget. And all of a sudden you want to bring process into that environment. That's a culture change.
Mm. Okay, now that's, wait, back up a step. That I'm going to agree with you on 100%. And I had to do it that way. But your point about you're changing the culture, but when you said zero trust is a culture change, I think of that as a process change. But when you're saying we brought process in general to an organization that had no process, it was, you want something, go get it. You've got a company credit card. It's good up to 100,000. What do we care? Just use it. And now you're saying, hey, look, we have to have a change management process. We have to have a process about development and a process about code promotion and a process about this and that and the other thing. Now you're bringing process in. That is a culture change. 100% agreed.
Jimmy, go ahead, Tyler. Did you want to agree or disagree with the disagreements or agreements?
I was just curious some of the examples that you might have seen, like the iteration of what DVD.com, aka Netflix, which is now separate companies that are the same company. I'm curious with some of those growing pains and cultures and processes that you've had to kind of adopt and look at, and the challenges, going from a physical media company to a streaming company, and some of the nuances of that within security, what those processes and culture changes might have looked like in the early days.
Now, before you answer that, Jimmy, do you guys still mail DVDs to people?
Yes, we do.
Okay, just checking.
So we do the gamut. So I can answer this question. What ends up happening is when you first start off, obviously, people. You can trust everybody within that realm. And then as you grow, you get international, you're hiring people who you've never met before. And so your processes, everything evolves, but that also means that unfortunately the culture evolves as well, or fortunately, unfortunately. So the same way you could go at 2 p.m. and go grab a beer, you can't do that anymore. And so watching that evolution, watching that lifestyle, watching the changes is you have to be able to adapt and learn, and also bring in personnel that may have been great personnel in that first iteration, but they're not quite the right fit in this new iteration.
See, Jimmy, one way to preserve that culture is like we just have a bar here in the studio, so like we don't have to go anywhere.
hey, so next time you're in California, just come on down. We have this big refrigerator that we keep stocked with some champagne. You just come on over.
There you go. It's one way to solve that problem.
I had a question.
Yes, Lee.
So when you mentioned going international, one of the things was wondering is what was it like in terms of learning the different information security or other standards when you had to look beyond the U.S. border? How do you keep it all straight in your head as to what's what and where you can't do things or where you have to stay?
So that was one of the most eye-opening things, because when I got there in 2015, we just started doing original movies. And we were launching at the time in Australia in terms of streaming, and the Pacific Asia, Japan. So working through the logistics, because the cloud environments in those environments weren't as mature as they were in America. So not only just dealing with the legal ramifications of all of that, but also the infrastructure of that was an interesting, a good challenge. But it also tests your ability to automate and to scale, because if your processes aren't sound, then you'll fall on your face.
Sorry, I was distracted by Tyler, who is erasing his passwords from the whiteboard behind him, because you could kind of see them through the blurred background.
Those were your passwords.
Oh, that is the best comeback. Love it. I love it. I'm curious, Jimmy, like security aside, like, but what's it like to work for, like, what was the start of the company, but obviously streaming is like the shiny new hotness. Like, what, in all seriousness, like, what's it like to work for what someone consider like the dinosaur of Netflix? But I think many of us are connected and don't often think about, my guess is there are people that aren't as connected and still need that kind of service.
So honestly, we talk about this as a team all the time. Like, it is the craziest, most effective environment I've ever worked at, because we're so used to working at things at such an immense scale. We're not at an immense scale now, but so now when we need to do something, it happens in almost real time. Oh, we need to implement a new firewall, change. We need to do this, change. And so our ability to change is, and we still have the old culture. So we still have the amazing parties, the amazing stuff.
Well, I mean,
so it's the best.
So Jimmy, I got a question for you. You had Bill Burns, who I've met with several times.
Yes,
who brought Chaos Monkey into Netflix and originated Chaos Monkey. I got to ask, I mean, is that culture still live there at Netflix?
So one of the things that I've tried to do and that we do is, I used to do a proof of concept of a new security tool, or the team did, every month. So we would be recycling, going through products nonstop to ensure that we not only had the best of breed, but we showed why it was the best of breed compared to other products that are in the market. And, also working with other, startups and companies to help kind of, gear their products to be leaders in the market. So yeah, we try to maintain that edge, but we also want to work with the community, because yes, being good at DVD.com or Netflix is a good thing, but wouldn't it be better if we were great if the security, when you log into Netflix, Disney Plus, Amazon Prime, all of those, we had great login, great security overall. And that's what hopefully I'm pushing and working with everybody on.
Nice.
Jimmy, I wanted to change gears a little bit and talk about the supply chain.
Yes.
You said something that was interesting to me earlier. You said, it's kind of like we just sit around and wait for the next big vulnerability announcement so that we can react to it. And this is at a time when I knew something else was coming out. I can't say why or give you any more details there, but now we do have a new vulnerability in pretty much every Linux distribution out there. And I do feel like we're kind of all just sitting around waiting for that. Like, how do we, well, first, like, why is that a problem, and expand on that? And then what can we do to solve this issue?
So it's a problem to be reactive because we're always waiting to get to hit back. So, it's almost like you're in a fight where the person gets to hit you first, and only if they connect with you, meaning they break into your environment, do you have to get to do something back.
It's like those slap fights. You ever seen those videos with the slap fights, right? Where the person's got to slap you first, and you just keep going until someone falls over? I like watching those. I don't know that I ever want to do that, but
that's how we make decisions here at Security Weekly.
And so, so that's, but for me, I do the automated red teaming. We do have red teams, but the issue is you can have red teams. You can do all the automated things you want, but when you have 1,000 third-party libraries out there, 1,000 JavaScript pieces of code, the scale of your landscape is growing faster than your ability to, scan all of it sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Even if you scan all of it, right? Like the groups that are finding some of these exploit, which is, interesting when we talk about PwnKit, right? You can look at other pieces of one piece of research was published in 2013, but they didn't necessarily take it to fruition and develop an exploit for it. And I think this is the hard challenge that we have, especially like you said, your landscape is increasing. Like, how do you know where those areas are where you're vulnerable? Scanning is only going to get you so far. Probably not very far in this particular case.
And I've never met a CISO, head of security, anybody in security that says, oh, I don't want to be secure. I don't want to do a great job. It's how do we, as a collective, cohesive unit, reach a certain level of what I like to call herd immunity from like the low level stuff. To me, ransomware has been out for what, 5, 6, 7 years, and it still makes the headlines. Like, to me, that should have been wiped out 3 years ago.
Amen.
But everybody's reactive, so you're not going to.
But ransomware is not. Ransomware is an opportunistic attack. It rides on any other exploit that anybody can find. It's not the can opener. It's just the thing that eats what's in the can. It should have been removed. But as long as somebody can find a new exploit to open the can to get inside, they're going to use ransomware.
No, so that sounds good, but ransomware is encrypting your data. And that's a CPU process. So if you see a CPU process that's encrypting your data that you didn't authorize.
That's good zero trust though, right? Not many companies have really gotten to that good adoption stage. I've said zero trust is a great idea, and if you can implement it well, like it's a red teamer's nightmare from the standpoint of, having to figure out in an unknown fashion, what hashes are allowed, what programs are allowed, to which IPs during which hours through which user account. Like that takes the threat landscape down to very, very narrow. I call them funnel pipelines. Like once you get these funnel pipelines of, hey, cows go down this chute, sheep go down this chute. If there's a wolf in one of those, like, we've pretty well locked that down, and we know that it's there, and we can deal with it and hurt it where we want it to go.
But remember, zero trust is a cultural change.
It's just hard to implement at scale, right? Like I'm curious, like the fact that you guys are getting to that point where I love the herd immunity is a fantastic term for that. Like your ability to not get hit by all these low level things and be able to focus on projects and maturity and secure roadmaps that are designing and implementing things like zero trust. That's very, very hard for many places that are still trying to get patch management or even just attack surface reduction down or even just understanding what their assets are. So that large scale where you have a red team and you got too much stuff to test, some people are just at a point where they have too much stuff, they don't even know what they have. So I think we're still at a collective point of not having enough we don't have either enough process or enough understanding of security or enough good security leaders in order to design and implement and not use emotion to develop very strategic plans in order to implement and start these processes in the right manner for many companies.
What you're saying is so spot on, but it goes back to what do we want to do? Because that's why I joined a lot of organizations, is because, and Lee Nilly is part of one of the amazing organizations I belong to as well, because it's not enough for us to sit and have this knowledge, have these opportunities, have this network, and not share it with other people. One of the main things I've seen from the people who get less vulnerabilities, less breaches, is they have a wide network that they rely upon and say, hey, have you seen this before? Have you seen this type of thing? How do you talk to the board? Ask questions constantly. And the people I see get popped or the people like, oh, we're good. We don't need to talk to anybody. We don't need to network with anybody. We're good.
So, I mean, that's almost a metacultural problem. I mean, we have to supersede. I mean, because I completely agree with all this because, you know, if I've got wolves in my cow chutes and so forth.
I thought you had like cows in the can. Is it like beef in the can?
Tinned beef with some wolf meat mixed into it or something.
Like
it gets ugly there, but. But I see that all the time. I saw it in law enforcement. I've seen it in all kinds of things. Nobody wants to share anything, and nobody wants to talk. And for certain, I mean, I've been in these meetings where people would sit there and they would go, now, asking for a friend, like, what if, you know, and you're kind of going, are you asking for a friend, or does this mean you guys are doing it? Because we need to know. And they're like, oh, no, we're good. Like you said, we're good. You know, our company's bulletproof. We don't have that problem. And it's sort of a metacultural idea as well, because you have to get them. And the IT people never want to talk about this stuff. And the security people never want to even talk to the IT people usually.
And that's one of the things that I try to tell people about the peacocking. And what I mean by that is that I don't care what your title is at this company, how much you're making. I don't care how many speaking engagements you have. That doesn't mean that you're the expert at all security. So let's work together to figure out how we can learn more. Oh, you did zero trust in a great way that didn't get you fired? Come on, show us how. You know, show us your lessons learned. You know, show us, you know, these wonderful widgets and gadgets. It's almost like the Chaos Monkey thing, right? We have a tool called Chaos Monkey and Chaos Gorilla that does some things. Why are we doing that? Let's share it with the community.
So, how do you get there? How do you supersede, you know, these silos of we're good? I mean, and get to the can of
opening the Camino.
Okay, okay.
And so one of the things that I did, me and some of my peers did, and we do it every so often, is we actually have other heads of security, CISOs, come to somebody's actual SOC or environment for a day, and we see what they actually are doing in that environment instead of what they're saying at the speaker level.
That's a pretty cool idea.
Wait. Come on. What you're telling me is that, you know, people lie or mislead or spin their words to their own CISO and their own CIO? No. Say it ain't so. I mean, come on, of course. I swear to God, half the advisory calls I do are, okay, have you checked that that's true? So I fully agree with you. I was just to be clear.
Well, yeah, I've definitely had those conversations where you're sitting in the room with people and you feel like the doctor, that's sitting there and the guy going, so does it burn a lot? And they're going, not me, no way, I'm good. But my friend now, he's in there. And I've had that with the IT people and the security people where you're asking those very questions and you're saying, you guys don't share all your passwords, right? And they're going, no, we would never do that, and then they're like, and then somebody runs out of the room.
We were talking about sharing, and I thought it was interesting that we look at the supply chain issues with open source, right? And sharing is a huge part of open source, and we are always encouraging folks, at least the proponents of open source, to share. And we've done a lot of sharing, which turns out has some consequences. So maybe I find a library and I'm like, oh, cool, someone shared it. And then I'm like, oh, it doesn't work for me anymore. So I'm going to create my own library. And then I share it. And then I get bored and I don't update it. And I think that's how we end up in this spot where open source has created this huge supply chain issue.
to me, it's to the point now, especially if you're an enterprise company, you get what you pay for pretty much. You're using all this free libraries, all this free stuff that's made by somebody living in a mother's basement that did this GitHub repo 2 years ago. And like, that's you building your palace on this one line of code that's holding up the whole foundation.
Yep. It's not just that. I mean, all kinds of people create. I mean, I create some of this code. Some people way smarter than me, which isn't saying much, create all this code, but for whatever reason, like they get a job or they move on or they just get bored with it, right? And then it just kind of hangs out there. And even projects that are well maintained, they're not necessarily all well funded enough to go find these vulnerabilities.
And to me, one of the things that would flip that is if we treat it almost like a bug bounty, where, oh, you found this bug in our company, here's a stipend, here's some money. Oh, you have this third-party library that my company uses, here's a stipend, here's some money.
Yeah.
You know, trying to flip that equation. That way you build maybe better quality of something.
Yeah, do the cost level out, right? Like if everyone started chipping in and there was a, Patreon, GitHub buys Patreon. Is it Microsoft that owns? No, Microsoft owns the other one.
I don't know.
Anyway, but Microsoft owns GitHub.
No,
right?
yes,
they own GitHub. They
So
own GitHub.
if Microsoft went out and bought Patreon, which wouldn't cost them, in Microsoft money, that would be drop in the bucket, right? And it was merged, and companies could give and say, "Here's some money, like keep maintaining that." Would that cost be like offset because maybe down the road that's going to cost my company a lot of money?
I'm going to actually disagree slightly, and I mean I hear you, and you've got a good point.
Are
But
you
I'm going to
disagreeing
disagree
outright, or are you disagreeing with the agreement or the disagreement of the previous agreement?
in the second part. So, no, my
So the
point
part
is
in the
that
third part.
I actually worked with an open source project that was doing great stuff. I said I'd like to, build some commercial modules. And closed source modules and add on to that. And some of it I'd love to have built by some of your devs. I'd like to bounty some features that will stay open source. And no, you can't bounty features. Why not? It'll change the dynamic. And there, by the way, Jimmy, there's your culture change.
I was going to say, yeah,
that's culture,
I was
yep.
going to point that out.
And then it'll change the dynamic, and it'll make it very weird for us, and we don't know how to handle that kind of thing. It's totally out of line with what we're doing. And it was very difficult and awkward. So eventually I just stopped. But I mean, it's what you're saying
but to me, that's
sorry, go ahead.
No, what you're saying is one of the typical failures that I see in security and the technology environment overall. Oh, open source. We're from the Berkeley, we use the Berkeley distribution. We use this licensing agreement. We don't want to change that. We want to keep this rallying cry for, open source, which trust me, I use a lot of open source. I think it's amazing. But if you're a $1 billion company that's using these tools, come on now. Like, we can't be trying to still do the hippie stuff.
I think there is a clash in cultures in that scenario. And I'm with you, Jimmy. Like, I appreciate and love the open source community. But I think the next stage of evolution and maturity is to start maybe, for lack of a better term, forking, right? Some of this, some of the functionality, maybe some of the culture, right? To go, I think it's really should be celebrated. Like open source has become this thing that we all rely on, that it's time for the next evolution of it. But you don't want to lose sight of, the folks that in Berkeley that don't wear shoes that are writing open source code. Like, we love you, and don't ever change.
No, and that's the whole point. Is that it's different levels to it. It's not like I grew up being part of, and I still am part of lots of open source projects. Like a lot of things that we do, that's non-paid or open source. But once you start making money off something, that's a totally different equation.
Yeah, it changes things. It does. No, it certainly does. But I also think we need to preserve that freedom that we have with open source, where we can be creative, where we're not beholden to anyone paying us. We're not beholden to, God forbid, a product manager, right? And customers. Like, the beauty, in my mind, of open source is the freedom to take it in whatever direction you want and be as creative as you want. And we get really great results with that, right? But maybe there's a fork of that commercial entity, maybe takes over, right? That provides a different set of requirements. I still want the freedom and open source and the love, and we share it and just take it in directions. I mean, that's so important for society and for technology. But as we've seen, so many companies now relying on this code that there does need to be some kind of structure, and the two have to live in harmony somehow.
Well, okay, so I forget who I was talking to, but they said that there's actually a lot of companies that would love to pay for open source code so that they could get support and security patches and development and get some features that they wanted and so on and so forth. They just don't know how to get the money to the open source people. And the open source people don't know how to take the money, like I mentioned a few minutes ago. So if somebody could come up with a company that acted sort of like a reverse bug bounty, a pre-bug bounty, that would be great. And you need to put me on the board of directors because I told you about it here and now. But I mean, it would work out really well.
Yeah, because I think we're gonna constantly be in this cycle of finding these vulnerabilities in the current model. Like if we're letting people write code to share code free and willy-nilly, which I agree we need, that has to be preserved. But I think we're going to constantly be in this, because as quickly as these bugs are squashed, new ones are going to be introduced.
But I mean, that's when you get to that forking moment.
Yes.
Where you've got to have a procedure and a culture that says, okay, this is fine to play with, but we're getting ready to finalize this. We need to fork this and make it our own and maintain it and manage it, because if we don't, even though it came from this wonderful world of total chaos at the software flea market, at some point you got to pull that in and make it your own and make it solid.
Doug said software flea market, not Paul. Just pointing that out for the audience that's listening at home. I called it freedom and sharing and love.
Well,
Doug called it a flea market.
What a flea market is. It's a place where you can sell an old violin.
But I think a flea market is dirty.
It's not dirty.
There's a lot of forking at the.
There's a lot of forking at a flea market, but it's okay.
I couldn't let it go. I had to make a pun on the forking.
Protect your software, and nobody will get itchy.
So with all the stuff you've got going on at DVD.com, Jimmy, do you have any trouble keeping security in the conversation, or have you figured out how to get them to trust you and always bring you or your team in when they got crazy ideas or a deadline or whatever?
So with the latest iteration of the lockdown for the last 2 years, unfortunately, security has been nothing but in the conversation. Ever since, there's just been big breach after big breach, because one of the things that I noticed was that the same way that we couldn't take a vacation, the attackers couldn't take a vacation too. So guess what they're doing more? The bug bounties picked up, the attacks picked up, everything's picked up. So it's not harder now to bring security into the conversation. And one of the big things that most people, especially if you're has login customers like we do, it's so easy just to switch from, oh, I'm not logging into this site anymore. I'm just going to log into Disney Plus right now. Like, to ensure that security doesn't stop that user from switching is front and center in front of our company. So I try my best to make sure that never happens.
Jimmy, do you think that the work from home created these horrible security holes and led to all these breaches, or are we coming out of this now thinking that wasn't the case?
And I have to apologize to all the customer service reps and sales reps and people that we thought couldn't work from home effectively, because they've done nothing but an amazing job. Some of the theories that I had coming into the lockdown have been totally dispelled. It hasn't been the weakest links that I thought they were. It's just been open source vulnerabilities like Log4j, open source things that were IT specific, not customer, not employee specific.
Yeah, I don't think it opened. Everyone thought it was going to be the end of the world for security if everyone started working from home. I mean, there was other concerns as well. Turns out people are actually more productive working from home in most cases, from the studies that I've read. I think most would agree with me on that, right? And I don't think it's a huge impact to security.
And I don't wear out pants nearly as fast.
That too. Well, physical security is interesting. I mean, we've actually talked a lot about how physical security has been impacted by the pandemic, and it's interesting. Like, I think people from that physical security threat that ties maybe to your data and those kind of attacks, I think people are better off working from home. And now there's less people in all these offices, so people that want to break in stick out more. There's that.
The only thing that I've seen a rise in is more like low-level spyware, like adware attacks, because now people are using their laptops for multiple purposes. That's the only thing that I've seen.
I mean, I think Google itself is spyware, but it's a topic for a different discussion.
Oh,
So curious if where you guys are dealing with some of the physical DVDs, have you seen any interesting attacks, say like someone printing their own DVD and putting, you know, something else on that DVD, or a QR code printed on there that tries to load something on the scanning device that ingests those? Like anything interesting or cool that is now available to talk about?
We've seen a lot of interesting things available to talk about. I mean, besides the fact that, you know, people don't want to rip as much anymore, but, you know, it used to be everybody wanted to figure out how the next ripping case and, you know, how to rip Blu-rays. That's just part and parcel.
How do you stop or discover people that want to put it like an adult DVD back and send it back to you? Is that, or do you just get caught because like it's common, you know who that was originally sent to? So
no. So we have agreements with the U.S. Post Office.
Oh, interesting.
And so some of the scanning techniques that we have are detected before they even reach our center.
Wow. That's cool. Obviously, we don't want to talk about exactly how that works because I don't want to give people ideas like, oh, that's how it works. I can bypass it in this way, right? There's a certain
no. I mean, if it didn't come from the post office, and so we have, because we've been around for a while, you know, it's like, how much money do you really want to waste for a $10 a month subscription?
Right.
You know, it becomes, if the attacker wants to spend $1,000 a month, it's still $20 a month.
Yeah, exactly. Other questions for Jimmy? What type of area? I'm just curious about the DVD business, right? Because I think many of us in the U.S. have forgotten about it. I mean, which regions is that more popular in?
So one of the great things about the DVD is we have the largest movie collection in the world. So if you're a person who loves movies, like you have your super high-end studio, so West Coast, upper of areas, or mid coast where your internet is down or something, or you just have slow internet where you want to watch the highest quality thing in your region. So you'll see a lot of, you know, just different environments. Do we have it? And then obviously Oscar time, because one of the things that happen is when it's generally our biggest day, and it's crazy because we always have a war room just for Oscar time. And so all of a sudden the winner is announced and everybody filling up the queue, because generally those movies you can't stream yet. So, and you can watch them on DVDs. So
that's cool. I wouldn't imagine that would have been an all hands on deck event for you.
Oh, I mean, because we still have, you know, millions and millions of customers. So when they start hitting it all at the same time, we want to make sure that they have the best experience possible.
Yeah, I mean, I know people that when they announce the Oscar nominations, they put their. I mean, I know people that still get DVDs, and they put their Netflix queue up with all the nominated films, and they request all those so they can watch them before the Oscars and stuff like that. So.
So I got a potentially zinger for Jimmy, and that is, what are you worried about? What keeps you up at night?
Good one.
Or have you got it nailed?
The thing that keeps me up at night is the external output of data that may be happening on a consistent basis over an extended period of time, right? Like the trick, you know, with ransomware is, yes, somebody can come in, yes, they can start the ransomware process, but they actually have to go out to an external site to get the key to encrypt the data, for instance. If I can stop that internal connection from connecting to that malicious external third party, then I can pretty much stop their ransomware attack. And so, but ransomware is just a slice of it. There's other types of attacks. One of the craziest things that I saw before Log4j and after Log4j in my dashboard for security reports. I had a whole slew of everything. It went from ransomware attacks to DNS attacks to NTP attacks to firewall attacks, web attacks, whatever. After Log4j for this month, 9 of my top 10 were all Log4j specific variants. So Log4j attacking DNS, Log4j attacking NTP, on and on. So it's just been crazy.
Does that worry you, where you get such a high rate, high fidelity, high publicity exploit, and yet there's still 438 critical Oracle vulnerabilities, or some tens in Microsoft CVEs that get dropped at the same time, and those kind of fly under the radar. So does that noise to signal ratio as a SOC and as an internal team, like, that could get pretty scary, where you're not sure if you're catching what you need to because of all the noise?
It definitely is scary from signal to noise, but that's why I would propose for many people, try the automated red team, because what ends up happening if you had an automated red team, you can actually run those new vulnerabilities that just dropped, because that automated red team solution that you may have would already have those attacks available. And so you can run them in your environment to see, okay, if I was vulnerable to this, would I have caught it? And so that's where having a red team, having an automated red team can help alleviate some of the fears. But attackers are smart and they're keen, and they can work around that. So I'm never comfortable just sitting around hoping. So hopefully, me and the team are working always to, verify that we aren't vulnerable, not just to the things that make the news, but also the things that are key.
Well, I like too, Jimmy, that you alluded to as well, that one of the things that keeps you up at night is those C2 channels. And that's where I really like automated red team and automated tools, because I want to run that through my environment, because the varying methods that change constantly for C2 communications is astonishing. And I also think some of the really good stuff isn't on GitHub, right? And so having a red team, whether internal, external, or some combination, that can run those simulations, I think especially for higher profile organizations such as yourselves, that's a great exercise to do.
The efficacy I've seen from that pretty much sells itself. Yeah. So when I generate a report now, it's like work with the IT team or work with WebEng or whoever. And when we first got the solutions in and we were running it, we first got the teams in, and now it's like, okay, we get it. Like, because there's one thing to have a vulnerability. There's another thing to show the exploit trail of that vulnerability and have it leave your system.
Yeah, exactly. And the creativity, I mean, Tyler and I have had some conversations, right? It's just, like, oh, well, it can just go over, a Slack channel or some other communication. Yes. But also, like, when I read this stuff, I know that the features you're looking at building as an attacker are like, what if I can randomize as much as possible? So I'm not slow and low, because that sticks out. And I'm not like super fast, because that sticks out. And I'm not at any regular interval in between, but I'm randomizing that to try and fit within the noise. I mean, it doesn't even take that much of a code. I mean, it does take a certain skill level in coding, but it's not a high skill level, in my opinion, to be able to randomize that C2 and get out. That's scary.
So I'm curious what the next iteration, what do you think is the next, or I guess, what are you seeing that is effective from a director and executive level at a very large company? What things are working to articulate some of the vulnerabilities? Like, yeah, you get some reports, you've got a bunch of blinky boxes, you've got a lot of tools at your disposal, you've got people doing pen tests. Like, what are you seeing that needs to change, and how can we be more effective at articulating or communicating some of those risks? Is that identifying the business risk, tying it back to the business? Is that talking different languages with the executives? Is that writing better reports? Like, how do we get to a point where, from your standpoint at that big executive level that's technical, how do we make that better and start to make some more headway in bigger companies?
So first, it would depend on your executive team's background, your background, and what they've had done before. Because as we were alluding to before, if you're coming in after a big breach, you pretty much have a green field that you can do. You can write any kind of report, and the maturity, because if I'm giving you the same report month after month and I'm not adapting, if you have a board or executive team that's steady, they would have had a certain level of education where they don't want to see the basics anymore. They want to see something at a slightly higher level. So understanding how long you've been at the company, understanding the culture of the company, and how is security being integrated into the development process and the development process results and your customer and employee results, meaning I can have the best security in the world. I can lock down everything. But if all my employees are pissed off and every time they see Jimmy, they cringe, I won't be around too long. So how am I working with the employees to ensure that I'm enabling them to do the best job that they can? They can be the best accountant, CFO, developer that they can. We're also building these robust security programs around that. So that's using some emotional metrics. Are you satisfied? Are you not satisfied with security? Do you know about security? Do you not know about security? Those more emotional questions that mean something. Because if all of my employees are pissed off at my password security scheme, they're going to write their passwords down on a sticky note and put them on a laptop. And it doesn't matter how good I talk to the executives about how security is. If I walk through the office or a team walked through the office and all they saw was sticky passwords, then my words mean nothing. So those are the type of things that I first try to address. Once I can work on the culture, I work on the employees, I get to know the pain points of what was their pain point from the previous security professionals, head of security. Like, what did they like? What did they find effective? Integrating that into my working style so that I can constantly be a better version of what I'm trying to achieve for the company, and working with my peers in the industry so that when I'm giving you a metric, I'm also going to try to give you ideas on what the competition is doing from a security standpoint as well.
That's interesting. So could we get away from writing reports then, and we could just do like some Netflix originals and kind of walk through the process and how to get these findings resolved? That sounds like a good idea. I like what you're saying.
Yeah, so hopefully they won't be, not necessarily Netflix originals. It'll be information security originals that we come up with, because one of the things that hopefully me and peers are trying to work on is we're using common language. When we say vulnerability, it means the same thing throughout. When we say incident, it means the same thing throughout. So that because one of the things that I realize, and many people, as you may realize as well, is if you're on a board for a company, you may be on the board for several different companies. And if you're hearing vulnerability explained one way at this company, vulnerability explained this way at this company, you're going to start asking questions. So hopefully we can come up with consistent common language.
Jimmy, are you ready to play 5 questions with Security Weekly?
Yes, of course.
All righty, here we go. 3 words to describe yourself.
Happy, family, energetic.
If you were a serial killer, what would be your weapon of choice?
Knife.
If you wrote a book about yourself, what would the title be?
Navigating the Valley.
What is your favorite hacker movie?
Gotta be Matrix.
Choose 2 celebrities to be your parents.
Live, dead, fictional, or otherwise.
I would say Denzel Washington. Celebrities would be I don't know. I don't know who could play my mama. So
that's the hard one.
Aretha Franklin. We could say that one.
There you go.
There you go.
Jimmy,
Respect.
Thank you so much for appearing on Paul Security Weekly. It's wonderful having you.
Oh, it was so much fun talking with everybody. Paul, thank you. Everybody, Lee, thank you all for having me. It's been amazing.
Awesome.
Absolute pleasure. Well done, sir. Thank you.
Coming up next, learn how to secure Ubiquiti Wi-Fi systems. Stick around.